Well, it is good to see everybody here this morning. We've got a good crowd, and we got some visitors with us. We have the Dooleys with us this morning, and we're thankful that they're here. And if you haven't met them, go ahead and take a minute and get to meet them. That is April's sister and brother-in-law. So they're kind people, and we're just glad that they're here, and just thankful for them. We got some. Of course, some very familiar faces in the crowd of people that we don't get to see very often. And we're glad that you are here as well. You know, we started off this morning kind of talking about, Father's Day, and I did mean it when I'm preaching something different. So it was kind of a joke, but not really. But at the same time, I did want to say this, fathers are very influential. They really are. If you go and look at the statistics, which we have in the past, and I'm not going to belabor all of those, but when you have a father in the home, there's so many things that work well. When you have a married couple, they just do better financially, for one. When you've got a dad in the home that is spiritually minded, the rest of the family tends to be spiritually minded. And we oftentimes think about how spiritually minded mothers are, and they tend to be more so, I think, and just in general. But if you don't have dad, the kids don't fall in line as well for some reason. And there's some thoughts along the lines with that we could talk about. But, the influence that a father has is pretty incredible. But and of course, I'm thankful for my own upbringing. I'm thankful for what I had growing up, and maybe we can think back to our own lives and go, well, I didn't have the best dad, but you know what? It doesn't matter. All of that being said, we have the best father anybody could ever have in our God, and so that's the biggest thing to remember. Now, continuing with this thought, let's think about some things here. Sometimes, we ask ourselves what we can do in the church. And so, what can we do for the kingdom? What is it that we can do for the congregation here? What can we do for the kingdom worldwide? What are we doing? What can we do? And I want to boil it down to one thing, and that we're talking about the influence of the father on the home. Well, let's think about our own influence this morning. What can we do for the kingdom when it comes to our influence? And so we have to admit that every one of us has some regard of influence, whether you know it or not. And I'm always interested by this because you'll have stories from people, and I've even been in congregations. I believe was even this congregation that I was standing talking to somebody, and they pointed across the room and said, they don't know it, but they're the reason I'm a Christian. I never said anything, I never say anything to anybody, but we have more influence than we realize. If you don't think you have any influence, you think about this. I've thought about this quite a bit in my life, my short life, but you think about the influence that you have when it comes to your kids. If you think you don't have any influence, just wait until your kids pick up the behaviors that you do, whether good or bad, right? It's the bad ones that really make you think, right? And so, you want to make sure that your influence is being used for good. And when it comes to the church, you want to make sure you've got a good one, just in general. Matter of fact, going back to that idea in Proverbs 22 and verse 1, a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches and loving favor, rather than silver and gold. Man, it'd be great to have a lot of money, right? Sometimes we joke about that. I think everybody probably has made a joke about, hoping that someone won the lottery and just gave them a bunch of money or something like that. Maybe it is that they could meet a rich person, and then all that person just pays off all their debts or whatever. We'll make jokes about that. And having wealth, wealth is a tool. That's not. It can be a hindrance for somebody. And so, you think about those things, and money would be great. But what's better than that is having a good name. How many people that are very wealthy have bad names, right? There's a lot of people like that because, by and large, how is it that you make a lot of money? Well, for a lot of people, that means that you have to step all over people to get there. And you make a lot of enemies along the way. And so, you know what's better than all that? Having a good name. It's good to have a good name. In Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 1, a good name is better than precious oil, and the day of death and the day of one's birth. You know, can you think about that? Man, it is so precious to watch a little baby, right? Just that precious little child, you know. You see that little baby whenever they are born, and they're just so sweet and pure, right? And we ooh and ah over the babies. But what we should be really concerned with is what? Well, how do we end our life? What is our life about? You know, whenever we die, what is it that is going to be about our life that people remember? Are they going to remember how kind we are? Are they going to remember, something else? Years ago, I was asked to do this, and I think everybody should do this, but this was an assignment in college, and it was an English class, and they said, want you to write your own obituary. Have you ever done that? Some of you may have, just kind of, for kicks, but when you write your own obituary, what do? You start saying things that you wish people would think about you, right? So maybe you think, well, kind and generous, I'm, personally, super handsome guy, right? Very charismatic, Thank you, Hunter. I appreciate that. You think about some things that you want to be, and you write those down. But then you start having to really realize and go, wait a minute, am I those things? Am I kind? Am I generous? Am I living up to that standard? And so when you write your own obituary, you get to go back and go, okay, well, these are the things I need to change in order to be that person, right? In Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 and 14, it says, Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, to be cast out and trodden under foot of men. Ye are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid. And so, we need to have a good reputation. We need to be this salt and light, as we see in the scriptures. But the point of this is very simple. You know what? We just need to have a good influence, and it starts with having a good name. It starts with being the kind of person that is worthy of influencing other people. In today's society, I don't think many of us saw this coming. If we saw it coming, we probably would have been rich at this point. But people have made a living now being social media influencers, right? And what does that mean? You put a product up there and you go, hey, you know what, this, you'll have women that say, hey, this is a really nice purse, I like this purse, or this is really good makeup, and this is why it's really good. You'll have guys that will, hey, look, I've got this new thing, and they'll make YouTube channels about these things, and they'll become what we call influencers. But what we need to be is not just someone who influences somebody just in general, but influences somebody for good. We want to influence someone to become a Christian, and that really boils down to how we live. All right, let's think about this. What is the purpose then of our influence? We've already talked about this a little bit, but Matthew 5 and verse 16 says, Even so let your light so shine that they may see your good works. And of course, a lot of times we stop there and go, well, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to show our good works. That's why we're doing this. And a lot of people really do stop right there. They don't think about this very next phrase. But what's the very next phrase here? And glorify your Father who is in heaven. So what is the purpose of good works? The purpose of good works is to glorify the Father. This is not something that we do to be seen of men. Matter of fact, there's passages about that in Matthew chapter 6. If you look at Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 5, it says this, Take heed that you do not your righteousness before men to be seen of them. else ye have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. When therefore thou doest alms, sound not a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and the streets, that they may have the glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have received their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, and thine alms may be done in secret. And thy Father who seeth in secret shall recompense thee. And when you pray, ye shall not be as the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have received their reward. See, the motivation behind what we're doing is everything, right? You know, the motivation behind this is the difference between being sincere and being manipulative, right? I mean, that's really the thing here. Now, let's say we talk about evangelism all the time now, and that's good. We need to be doing that. But why are we trying to bring people in? Are we trying to convert them from the error of the ways, bring them to Christ? Or are we just trying to pad numbers and get more people in the pews? Well, you know, if we're doing the latter, we could succeed in that. But what good has it done? It's done us no good. It's done nobody any good, really. What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring people to the Lord. You know, there's the difference there. One is selfless. The other is self-serving. One is beneficial. The other is manipulative. And so what we're trying to do is we're not trying to do things to be seen of men. We're trying to do things that glorify the Father. It is our motivation. Now, we got to think about this. Well, how do we influence other people? Because there's a lot of ways in which we can do this. You know, the things that we do and say are the main things. You know, in Matthew 12, verses 34 and 35, it talks about the things that we say. And in Philippians 1, verse 27, the one that I would like to focus on is in what we do. And a lot of times you see that these things just go together so seamlessly. You know, what we say and do work together. In Philippians 1, verse 27, it says, "Only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, that whether I come to and see you or be absent, I may hear of your state, that ye stand fast in one spirit, with one soul, striving for the faith of the gospel." In some of the translations, I believe the King James does this, but some translations say, let your conversation. But see, what is it about the conversation aspect of this? You know, we talk about the things that we love, right? You know, I don't know if I'm kind of getting to know this a little bit better, not from personal experience, but just by being around people. But you know what grandparents like to do? They like to talk about the grandkids, right? Now, if you're a grandparent and someone else starts talking to you about their grandkids, what are you doing? You're like, you know, that's great and all, but here, let me tell you about my grandkids, right? That's what grandparents do, right? You know, there's a temptation there to do that for, you know, parents as well. Hey, you got good kids. Let me tell you about my kids. We talk about the things that we love. You know, I have been around people that all they talk about is sports. That's all they talk about. And I like sports. Man, but we should have some other conversations, right? More than just sports. More than just what the pastimes are. I've been around people that all they could do is talk about food. I'm not in on that. I don't know. I don't know what that is. I like food, but I'm not a foodie. People are like, "Oh, have you ever gone and eaten at this place and gotten this specific dish?" And man, I don't get that. I don't get that at all. I'm like, hey, you know what? I can go to Texas Roadhouse and get a steak, and I think that's great, okay? But, you know, I'm not going to go to some other store and go get a quiche. I don't know. But there are people out there, that's what they do. They like that stuff. But if that's all you talk about, that's all that's on your heart, right? So what should our conversation be? Our conversation is going to be about the things that we love and the things that we do. When it comes to Christians, where should our conversation be? It's supposed to be with God. We should be talking about God a little bit more. Have you ever been ashamed, been around someone from the denominational world, and you start talking to them, and they start bringing up God? And you're thinking, I should have done that? Man, that's what we should be doing. We should be telling everybody about it. And yet, for some reason, people are ashamed to do that. In Matthew chapter 10, verses 32 and 33, Christ said that if you confess me before men, I will confess you before my Father. But if you deny me, I will deny you also. We need to be concerned with what we do and how we talk. But we need to be able to do all this and show our faith. In James 2 and verse 18, yea, man will say, thou hast faith and I have works. Show me thy faith apart from thy works, and I by my works will show thee my faith. There are a lot of people out there that believe that, you know what, I just need to believe, that's it. But belief, having faith and not having anything, any substance to it, no works behind it, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter at all. We talk about this a lot. We have things going on in the congregation. Maybe it is that we have a gospel meeting. Well, we want everybody to come, and I get it. Some people have some different work schedules, may not be able to come to every little thing. But you know what we should be doing? We should be coming to everything that we can, for sure. When it comes to worshiping God, you know what? We don't need to be taking off time from worshiping God. We should be adding more time to worshiping God. When it comes to learning about the things that He would have us learn about, there's a reference to Bible class earlier. That's where we need to be. We need to be coming to Bible class and learning these things. It makes so much more sense. Now, I know, I've told this before, and I'm saying it again. But when we think about how often that we eat every day, how often, how much time does that take up? But then you look at Matthew chapters 5 and 6, and you see these things about, hungering and thirsting after righteousness. Well, if we're hungering and thirsting after righteousness daily, we're going to be in the Word of God daily. Not just one time a week. You know what? Maybe it is that someone might go, hey, you know what? I've got some health issues. I'm going to fast for a little while to work out with these health issues, and so they may use that kind of as an aid in working on their body, and so they may 1 week maybe they eat on one day, and then they go the rest of the week and they don't eat, only to pick up eating the next week, right? Someone might do that. They might fast for 5 or 6, 7 days. Might do that. But just think about this. What if you did that every week of your life? Matter of fact, it's not just a day that you eat. Let's just say, because a lot of people, if you gave them a day and they just ate a bunch of stuff, man, you could probably put down 8,000 to 10,000 calories pretty easily, right? So you'd say, well, I'm spreading that out. Maybe that's not so bad. But what if you just relegated that to one meal? Just one meal every week. How long is it going to take you before you're unhealthy? It's probably not going to take long, right? You're going to start feeling sick. You're not going to have any energy. You're not going to, might even get to the point where you're looking at food and go, man, I can't even eat. I'm feeling that sick. And that's how some people treat the church. Just once a week. And then they're done. Until the next week. And they're spiritually starving themselves. And eventually, you'll starve yourself to death. Let's think about some more things with our influence. And when it comes to our faith, we pray that everyone has a good influence and faith. And if not, then what do you need to do? It's kind of like the obituary thing we talked about. You need to rethink some things. But our influence lives long after we are gone. You know, I love this. I have been asked to do very few weddings, and I've actually done 0 weddings. I've done a lot of funerals. And you know what? I actually do like doing funerals. You get to know people better than you ever knew them while they were alive. You know, people are just so interesting. And when you do a funeral and you start talking to the family, you'll find out really quickly that you cannot fit all that stuff in. People have done way too many things in their life. And I remember the most recent example of that is Brother Matthews when we had his funeral, and me and Larry Grounds we sat with the family for a couple of hours, and they just told story after story after story after story, and there was just no way to fit all that in. But also with that, and I realized that, Brother Matthews had lived a good full life, but man, he packed it full. He had lots of stuff in there. And I was thinking, man, I'm kind of ashamed. I'm not done half of what he did. Our influence lives on after we're gone. And it is those things that we need to be concerned about. And you think about this, I think the first time I ever really paid attention to this was in Hebrews 11 and verse 4. In Hebrews 11 and verse 4, it says this: by faith, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he had witness borne to him that he was righteous, God bearing witness in respect of his gifts, and through it, he being dead, yet speaketh. How long had he been dead? Abel had been dead thousands of years to this point that this is written. And yet, he is still being talked about in this sense. Go back to that thought of the obituary. What are you going to do? What kind of person do you want to be? When you leave this life, what are people going to say about you when you're gone? Are they going to look at you and go, well, you know what? They came every now and then, but I guess, at least they came some. Or is the thought process going to be more of, I would not be the Christian I am today had it not been for them? What is it that you want people to say about you? Our influence lives long after we are gone. And that is good or ill. Whether we have been righteous or not. In Revelation 14 and verse 13 it says, and I heard the voice from heaven saying, right, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from henceforth, yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their works follow with them. Have you ever thought, man, this is never ending, right? You think about things, and maybe I don't know if you've ever been like this, but when you go door knocking, a lot of times we go door knocking for things that happen, and the times of year when we go door knocking tend to be hot. I mean, you go door knocking before VBS. Well, VBS is in the middle of summer, right? And well, man, it's going to be hot. Or you're going to have a fall gospel meeting, right? Well, around these parts, it's probably not going to be cold yet. It's probably not even going to be cool yet when we start door knocking. And we pray for it to be that way, but it might not be. And you're out in the heat, and you're walking around, and you're tired, and you're thinking, man, what are we doing this for? Is anybody going to come? We might have some negative thoughts there, and we may need to question some of that and our effectiveness. But here's the thing that I'm saying. When we die, the things that we've done will follow us. Even those little things, it's going to follow us. Some of the great men who have gone on before us, have left work that benefit us. Let me give you this example. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and he's a preacher, and he was getting rid of a lot of his books, and he said, honestly, I don't go to my bookshelves. And I was like, well, I can get that if you don't go to your bookshelves. I go to my bookshelves pretty much every day. I'm pulling something off. I'm reading something and I'll think of a book where somebody wrote something years ago, and I go, I remember they wrote something on this, and I can't remember what it was. I remember it was in this book, and I start looking through the table of contents, and I'll find it. I'll go read that chapter again. These people have gone on, and we're still benefiting from it. I mean, eventually, after we get through the Wednesday night study that we're doing, we're going to come back to doing, the harmony of the scriptures here. And you know what? I base a lot of that off of J.W. McGarvey. And he has been dead a long time. I go to works from Guy and Woods and Gus Nichols, and both those men died when I was a boy. I didn't know when they died that I would be one day holding their books and reading them and gleaning from them. At the same time, I've been a part of congregations that faithful men, whether preachers, elders, deacons, the members, it doesn't matter. They have gotten up and they've preached faithful lessons that some of them I can still remember to this day. We glean from the work that people have done before us. You can think about some of the things that maybe have even gone on here. I've known of congregations that they've had people that were just so faithful in the work, and when they die, people have to pick up and try to do what they were doing, and next thing you know, they're going, this is too much. We're going to have to split this up between 3 or 4 people because they were just doing so much of all this stuff. Their work benefits us. You think about our influence, again, when it comes to our children. In Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 3, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee, and thou mayest live long on the earth. In Deuteronomy 11 and verse 19, and ye shall teach them to your children, talking of them when thou sittest in thy house, when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And so parents, what's going to happen with your influence when it comes to your children? Are they following the Lord because you follow the Lord? Or are they doing something completely different because what they've seen in your house is not what they needed to see? Now, I get it. I get up here and I'm preaching all this, and I tell you what, the first thing I'm thinking is, man, I have fallen short in so many ways. I think about my kids, and I think, they could have gotten a better dad. And I'll do the best I can, and I'll try to improve, but it is what it is. They got what they got. But we need things like this to motivate us to move forward, to realize, you know what, yeah, I do have some faults. But you know what I need to do? I need to work on those and be better. As parents, it's hard, I know. And as we get older, I know it gets harder in some ways because, you no longer have any reign over your children as they get older. But you can always influence them for good. And so use your influence to make sure that your family follows God. I know that we have a lot of people here I look out that are brethren and have already done this, but you know what we need to do is we need to be faithful to God. If you've not been faithful to God, maybe it is you've not even become a Christian yet. You need to hear, believe, repent, confess, and be baptized. But after that, you need to be faithful. Live your life faithfully for the Lord. And make sure that you are leaving a good legacy behind you. That people that follow your example will go to heaven. If you are in need of this invitation, it is yours. Please come as we stand as we sing.